Full Sail the Sailor and the Sea Wicket. My family called me Blethel, but I am known far and wide as Full Sail the Sailor, Captain Full Sail to the crew of my ship, the Eelflu, which is named after the bright little bug that lights up the skies of my homeland in early summer. I did not grow up near the sea, although I was always surrounded by water. I grew up in the Runish marshes where the mighty rivers Bluestran and Brownstran meet and spread over many leagues, before finally their waters merge fully together and head downstream to the distant coast at the Espen. There, in the Runish marshes, my people live and generally thrive if left alone. We are a famously independent people, fishers, craftsmen, and herders of water cows, and many have claimed dominion over us, but none have been acknowledged by us as our masters. I grew up in one of the numerous small houses built on floating mats of willow and reeds that dot the marshes. Our summer houses, Reshen, are rarely more than 3 mantle in width and the same in height, and are typically made from bent saplings covered in grasses and the large waterproof leaves that crown the Basanoa trees of the shallow waters. Our winter dwellings are larger, sturdier, and better suited for when we anchor up for the seasons of wind and rain on more permanent raised islets of layered mud and reeds. We cover these cancel with the cherished water cow leathers that are handed down within a family as treasured heirlooms. In these cancel, warm and cozy, living on a diet mostly of dried fish, water cow, cheese, and baked Basanoa stem, we happily sit out the storms, carving the musical instruments that fetch such a good price on markets from Morrigan to Liff and in the court of Albion, until it is time once again to move the water cows on to feed on the fresh new shoots of spring. This has been the way of life in the Runish marshes for generation after generation. It was not for me. Never satisfied, that's you, Blethel, Ma would say. Give you Gaff, and you'd want Kyle. This is a common Runish expression and rather relies on you knowing that Gaff and Kyle are basically names for the same fish. My attitude wasn't my parents' fault, my not taking to the Runish way of life. My parents were everything you could wish from your ma and pa. They were hard-working and loving souls, and it was a terrible calamity that they were taken so early by the sweating sickness. The water cows themselves were not the problem either. I love these friendly, reed-munching freshwater heavyweights, probably more than most of my people do. I had a natural affinity for the gentle creatures, and they responded in kind, never giving me any problems at milking time or when calving. It was as if they could feel my genuine love for them, even as I felt I could feel theirs for me. I had a particular affection for Mama Matlin, the herd matriarch, and, young as I was, I probably bonded to her as the senior herders wanted to do, especially after my pa died. Certainly I could feel her joy at the birth of a new addition to the herd, and her fear when a shiver of jabber-jabbers was close. My people have many stories of water cow herders who were warned by their herds of approaching danger, whether it be human bandits or marauding jabber-jabbers. How disaster was averted and lives, both water cow and human, were saved. Perhaps I was one of these people, and the water cows could speak straight to my mind as some claimed happened. One thing I know for sure, when I look back at my childhood, I was never happier than when I was frolicking in the water with that year's water cow calves. splashing and diving and helping them to take their first unsteady steps on what passed for dry land in the marshes. But as I grew older, whenever I was on or even in the water, my eyes were drawn to that distant point where I had been told the Espen flowed on towards the sea. Ah, the sea, the sea. We made our boats, our dinks as we called them, on frames of woven reeds and saplings covered in water cow leather, further waterproofed with tree resins. Simply constructed and suitable for 1 or 2 people dinks are maneuverable, and their narrow drafts makes them ideal for the most choked of watery byways. They are propelled by broad-bladed paddles that we make from Basanoa wood and carve intricately. These are also much sought after in the marketplaces of the world. The dinks were indeed fun to paddle and to fish from. Yet, from a very early age, I wanted to sail. I do not even know where I first heard of sails. Certainly our dinks do not require them. In fact, they can seriously compromise their stability, as I learnt when I first stole my grandmother's prized winter leathers to try to make a sail to get more speed from my dink. The first I had made with my own hands. The dink capsized, and I got a well-deserved punishment. "Blethel, you jabber's arse!" shouted Pa. "For that, no cheese for a 14 night." I was and remain ferociously fond of water cow cheese, which has a piquancy not found in your land cheeses and lasts longer too. Those too weary to try it do not know what they are missing, so this was indeed a great punishment. I should add that my fellow marsh dwellers are very firmly not a sea-going folk. Only one of our number had ever even seen the sea before me. It was said this was Alred the Wealthy, renowned for his frequent hush-hush trips down the Espen, purpose unknown or not spoken about. As a people in general, we have a great mistrust of the sea, probably down to the rare tidal storm surges that can race along the Espen and damage good grazing water meadows even as far inland as our marshes. This salty water causes serious problems for the vegetation and the water cows and my people. Amongst us, the sea is rarely even spoken about, and when it had to be mentioned, it was in hushed tones. The strongest curse in Runish is, "May the sea take you," and that is fighting talk to be sure. Perhaps it's because so much of what we are, our lives, and what we accomplish eventually makes its way to the sea. There are no monuments and burial mounds for the people of the marshes. Yet it was obvious to all, even before I grew to manhood, that my path was a watery one that led across the marshes and down the Espen to the great wide sea beyond. I wanted my life to be interesting, not dull and predictable. And that is what happened. You may think this reminiscing is irrelevant to my purpose here. This is not the case. Unless I first give some context to my life and adventures, you will never truly understand what I have to say about the Blue Pearl or that most mysterious of mysteries, the legendary Sea Wicket. I heard about the Sea Wicket on my very first voyage. I call it a voyage, but the vessel that I called home then, the afterthought, was not much more than a shore-hugging skip, and I was the greenest of new recruits, a rig monkey for this solid 3-canvas ship. As the new boy, I was the butt of all the old jokes. "What's that, young Blethel?" said Sadie the busser in ship stores. You want some elbow grease for polishing ship's brass? Sorry, we've run out. Left-handed nails, young Blethel, said Sadie. I know I had some around. Tell first mate he'll have to use right-handed ones until I can find them. And probably my most ignominious introduction to shipboard life, when I was requested to get a new pair of windsocks for the captain. A pair of windsocks, eh, young Blethel? You'll have to tell the captain they only come in singles. As the new boy, I was also expected to swallow the tallest of tall tales, and no tales were taller than the stories of the sea wicket. The sea wicket was said to be the source of huge sea snakes, of many tentacled leviathans the size of small towns, of singing seaweeds, of mermen and mermaids, the smith crabs that can snip a man's leg in two, and monstrous whirlpools that can swallow a whole fleet of warships without leaving a single nail or line. The sea wicket, it was said, was the source of lights so beautiful they could send a man mad or entice him to his death, and of music so fabulous it could make pirates weep, and it made winds so terrible that they could strip the flesh from a gully in flight. It was also the gateway to shortcuts that could take weeks off your voyage and to a lost underwater kingdom of beautiful women in need of men to help save their race from extinction. That last one was certainly the most wistful of wistful thinking. I was sure of this even at an age so tender I had yet to grow a beard. The sea wicket, apparently, was the maritime cousin of the wicket gates that enchanted woodlands and changed the lives of man and beast throughout the many lands of our world. Some said those were the source of riches and could make your very dreams come true, while other tales said they also were portals across the lands, and to different lands and even different worlds as well. Of course, there were no forests to enchant at sea, and how can you build a gate on water anyway? So, even though I was once sent to ask our quartermaster for elbow grease and left-handed nails, skinny rig monkey I may have been, but I did not believe the stories about sea wickets. After all, there were no wickets in the waters of the Runish marshes, so why should there be sea wickets? I knew my people treated most of those stories as being typical of the folks whose wits have dried out, as we like to say, about people born too far away from a decent splash of water. Yes, there was no doubt that the sea wicket was a story for children and greener rig monkeys than I had been, and this is what I believed for many, many years, even after I found the blue pearl. No, I did not become a believer until the day a sea wicket changed my entire life and my destiny. I was shipping on the Sally Lately when I found the blue pearl. The Sally Lately was a venerable lady of the sea, captained by Icross Ange, a man of Albion. The Sally Lately was long in the draught and not likely to get you anywhere fast, but she would never fail to get you to your destination, so far at least. I was no longer a green rig monkey, but an assistant sailmaster, and sported the fine moustaches I cultivated to this day. As a lithe and nimble sort, I still took my turn in the rigging. To be honest, I have always enjoyed it, and, considering I was brought up in a region singularly noted for its lack of even higher ground, let alone mountains and hills, I had no fear of heights. So it was that, on a day that promised to be fair, I was adding to the sail on top when I first had notice of the bitch wind. Bitchwinds might have lived in the same crab pot as sea wickets if there had not been the testimony of so many seamen who had experienced them. They blew up out of nowhere and had no allegiance to the prevailing wind of that particular moment. They were fickle as regards to strength as well as direction and could disappear as fast as they arrived, leaving drowning men and upturned hulls behind them. Clouds behaved strangely around them too, obviously, and they turned a strange colour as well, hence the expression, blue as a bitchwind cloud. The clouds I could see from the rigging were blue. There was a strange smell too that I didn't like. "Bitchwind! Bitchwind!" I screamed at the top of my voice, and then set about stowing as much canvas as was possible, reefing the rest. Despite my best efforts and those of the rest of crew, we still had too much canvas exposed when the wind hit us port side on. We tipped over like a one-legged helmsman on shore leave. After 9 pints, I went flying from the rigging and hit the sea with my face. The water took no injury. The world went black. I came around before my lungs emptied and gave out, and I instinctively started to swim. I had no idea I was swimming downwards, only that something was drawing me on. Deeper and deeper. The blackness was now filled with distant pricks of light, like a cloudless night sky. Was I swimming in water or the space between the stars? I felt I was surely not alone. I had the same feeling I used to get when swimming with the water cows, a presence both warm and reassuring. Ahead of me appeared a tiny blue speck that grew into a small blue ball, as if our own world was being viewed from space, oceans and all. If such a thing could ever be possible. I was close now. I could stretch my hand and touch this beautiful blue sphere decorated with white and green. I feared to, but it was as if it wanted me to not just touch it, but to hold it close and take it with me. So I did, and somehow swam back to the surface, lungs bursting, where Captain Ange, may his winds always be moderate and his sails fair, and his crew found me half drowned but alive. In my pocket was a large, smooth-shelled oyster, and inside this strange oyster, I later found the blue pearl. A life at sea is not an easy one to choose, and, although you can get by, it is much harder to accumulate sufficient wealth to, say, buy your own ship, every seaman's dream. You may have heard about men and women who won their ships in games of chance or as part of a wager. This is bilge water. No sailor worth their salt would risk losing a ship on something so trivial. You don't live long at sea with that sort of outlook. No. If you wanted to own your own ship, there was nothing else to raise the need's returns but to turn to free trading, or, as the ill-informed like to call it, smuggling. Free trading is a much better term for any number of reasons, but mostly because it emphasizes the two most important aspects of this activity, the trading and the fact that we are not sticking some filthy tax or levy on the goods simply because somebody has the gumption to bring them into a land others believe they own. Supply and demand have their place in free trading, of course, and the one item that was most in demand was Gap beer. And it is Gap beer that helped make me the fortune I needed to purchase and outfit the Ildflu. But it was knowledge gained by my upbringing in the Runish marshes that was at the bottom of it all. In particular, the curiosity I had as a lad, which led to me spying on Alred the Wealthy and seeing him load 2 small barrels onto his dink late one afternoon. Barrels that were absent when he returned from his trip 4 days later, with a new coat for his wife and toys for his children. "Good eventide, Alreed," I said to the grey-haired man sat outside the Kelpie Tavern on Newport Harbourside. "Good health to your water cows and family." He turned slowly and surveyed me at length before his broad face broke into a grin. He had aged, but the years had not taken too great a toll. Wealth helps with that. "By the tit of the great she-cow, it's young Blethel," said Alreed. "Blethel who longed for an interesting life, grown to manhood and then some. Years of pulling lines and climbing canvas will do that to you, Alreed." "Blethel, Blethel, why I never did." "You remember Blethel, don't you, Coppernoll?" said Alreed, addressing the young man sat next to him, who I recognized as being his eldest boy, now also grown to manhood. "Of course I do," said Coppernoll. "He could swim like a fish and hold his breath like a water cow. All us younger boys hated him for that." "And my good looks, too," I added. Coppernoll grunted, and then we all laughed, and then shook hands in the Runish way, hand to forearm, before I joined them to share the pitcher of ale I had just purchased. "So, are you leading an interesting life, Blethel? And are you master of your own vessel yet?" Alreed asked me. "Working on it, Alreed. Working on it. And I am called Full Sail in these parts now." Alreed narrowed his eyes. "Full Sail, is it?" he asked me. "Yes, from when I was a rig monkey. The crew liked to hand out nicknames, and as I could always be relied upon to ensure the vessels I crewed caught every puff of breeze, Full Sail I became. I became quite prized as a crewman, especially when we were in situations where we needed to outrun any other ship that might be interested in our cargo, if you follow my drift." Alreed did follow my drift, as did Coppernoll, who was every inch his father's son. "And do you do a lot of outrunning still?" he asked me. "In this interesting life?" "I have, and that is my hope for the future," I said, "if I was to get the right cargo." "Such as?" Alreed asked, now interested. "Such as the barrels that you have been transporting across the Runish marshes for the last 30 years or so," I told him. Alreed laughed at this. "I saw you then, Blethel Full Sail, hidden under the sacks and spying on me when you thought I couldn't see you." "I guessed as much," I admitted. "But you never saw me sample a barrel, did you?" Alreed's ale spillage as he went to take a sip was ample evidence that this was the case. "You little tyke," he said, wiping his chin on his jerkin. "I did miss that." "What an introduction to beer it was," I said with a sigh, putting down my tankard. "Everything else since has been a disappointment." "It's true," both men agreed. "Which is why I want to taste more," I added quietly, leaning forward. "And on a regular basis, if you follow my drift, once again. I can always get a good price for what I sell." Alreed's point was a good one. "Why would I look elsewhere?" "The price you are offered, Alreed, is determined by the costs the captains must incur to crew and sail the types of vessel that can carry a full cargo along the coast and between the ports that service the lands neighboring the Siccan Sea, and escape the levyman at the same time."
"That's true, father. I've heard them say as much. Overheads."
They're always complaining of them." "What would you have in mind, then?" Alreed asked. "A much faster, smaller vessel that specializes in smaller loads, as it were. The levyman would never be able to catch us, and we could undertake more trips, floating over the sea like a summer Ildflu over the Runish marsh. Still, I'm not sure how much more I would profit." "You would profit because you would not just be selling Gap beer to the free traders. You would be equal partners in the sale of the Gap beer at every port along the Sickened Sea. And that is a very sweet sum, I can tell you." "How sweet?" Alreed asked. "I did always have a sweet tooth," I told him. Both father and son sat back and contemplated this amount of money. "And how would you get this Ildflu?" Alreed asked. "As you are not yet master of your own vessel, where would this ship come from?" "I have some money put by, but I would need to borrow the majority of the funds." "Oh, yes." Alreed eyed me suspiciously now. "And why would anybody lend you such sums?" "Because I have collateral," I told him. "Collateral? That's a very dry word," Alreed said, this being a very Runish sort of insult. And so I showed him the blue pearl. The blue pearl took their breaths away. It always does. It still takes my breath away every time I take it out to look at. It wasn't just the size or the depth and vibrancy of the blue, which was remarkable in itself, nor was it the fascinating way the other colors, the greens and whites, moved across the surface. No, it was that when you looked at the blue pearl, it filled your mind, your heart, your very being. Somehow, this gem, the size of a plum, talked to you. It asked you about your dreams, your hopes, your ambitions, and, without judging, let you know you were loved and valued. All without any words we would recognize as such. "You could sell that and buy yourself a fleet of boats," observed Coppernell, after I had safely put the blue pearl away in its safe place next to my heart. "Except I couldn't," I told them both. "Only in direst need could I part with the pearl. Like a water-cow herdsman and his matriarch, we are bonded. The herdsman could not part with the mother of the herd, not for mere money, not unless he was beyond desperate." Alreed nodded in understanding. After all, he was Runish and had his own fine water-cow herd that he had built with his frequent trips down the Espen. He also had 4 sons who would all need their own herds when they came of an age for marrying. "Let us go looking at ships," he said finally. "I have just the one in mind," I said back at him. And many years later, when Alreed the very wealthy passed on at a fine old age, and I was Captain Fullsail of the schooner Ildflu, and equal partners with Coppernell the also wealthy, the sweetness kept on flowing. All went very well until the day of the Sea Wicket. We were outrunning the levyman's ship named, with a great lack of imagination, the Levyman, which we had done a number of times. Bless them, though, they still tried. This time round, they came armed with bombards. This fiendish application of the black stuff looked set to make life harder for free traders. Dodging rocks and other such debris fired through the air, mostly for free traders slower than the Ildflu, that is. What the levyman had forgotten was that the heavy iron casings needed for each bombard, even without all that stone and shot, added lots of extra weight that made their large ships even less speedy and maneuverable. They could probably hear our jeers and catcalls even over the blasts of their bombards as we left the levyman in our wake. We sped on unimpeded, and all was good with the world. Or so the smug captain of the Ealdflew thought. He turned to look at the sea ahead and thought about the next port they would be visiting. Then the sea wicket rose up from the ocean depths. It made our hearts skip a beat, and we stopped in our tracks, jaws slack. It was larger than I might have anticipated, if I had ever given the matter much thought. Higher than the highest mast it rose, and higher still as more and more appeared. A number of ventricle bars ran from top to bottom. Black they were, but not black like the night. Black like no other colour had yet been created. Yet between these bars was a light so intense it was unbelievable that black could exist in such proximity. A terrible but beautiful light that could break your heart with its magnificence. And in that light there existed colours and shapes that looked at first familiar and then so strange that your dreams could never compete. Glimpses they seemed to me, like a taste of other places, maybe even other times, that the Wicket might take you to or damn you to. It was too much to comprehend, and that was before it spoke to me. I say speak, but at first it was mostly similar to my communication with the water cows and the sensations I received from the blue pearl. And it was with that thought and with the blue pearl burning at my heart that the wicket keeper spoke to me for real.
So you are the one the blue pearl chose.
I struggled to find my voice. I struggled to even think. The wicket-keeper was amused, and for the first time I had an image in my mind. Surely this was one of the leviathans of the deep I had heard about as a rig monkey, huge with eyes that saw more than any man or woman's ever could do. It spread across the sea floor, surrounded by long limbs, each of which seemed to move with a will and volition all its own. As well they might. Who could tell with such a being? I thought I had found the pearl, I managed to croak. Or maybe I just imagined I did. Who knows? This the wicket-keeper found even more amusing.
Many there are who chance upon the offspring of the sea wicket, and believe it has happened by chance. The merpeople, the blue pearls, the castles of the smith crabs, and the majesty of the singing sea winds. Yet it is rarely by chance that these encounters do happen, and certainly not in this case. This blue pearl came into being for a very specific purpose.
Which was what, exactly? I managed to gasp, still daunted.
Why, Full Sail the sailor, to find one such as yourself.
For what purpose, though?
Why, guardian of the blue pearl and herder of water cows? That is for me to know and for you to find out. In time, Full Sail, in time.
With that, the image of the Leviathan faded from my mind, and the sea wicket descended once again into the deep, leaving behind it a weeping, awe-struck crew. Bereft of this great beauty and a bewildered captain with a thankfully still intact Ealdflew. Of the levyman there was no sign, not a nail, line, or canvas. The only indication that the sea wicket had ever been there was the bitch wind that its very presence had created. The world would never be the same. My family call me Blethel. I am from the Runish marshes, but I am known far and wide as Full Sail. Full Sail the sailor, Captain Full Sail to the crew of my ship, the Eeltflu, which is named after the bright little bug that lights up the skies of my homeland in early summer. I am a free trader who runs gap beer along the coasts and islands of this land with many different names. I am also the guardian of the Blue Pearl, who talks with leviathans of the deep, that are keepers of the sea wicket. As for my future now, I have no idea, but that keeps life interesting, which is all I ever asked for.